I don't know if you knew this because I sure didn't, but there was apparently a Green Arrow movie in development around the same time as The Dark Knight. Apparently, there was a full script written for the movie and it had a ton of buzz around it. Everyone I've seen speak about it says the film sounds amazing, and I agree that the concept and setup of this movie sounds like something I need in my life ASAP. But as I dive into the script, there are definitely some pretty bizarre creative choices that make me fully understand why the film was scrapped. So with no further ado, let's dive into Green Arrow: Escape from Supermax. What's going on, guys? I'm Eddie. Welcome back to another video. Before we get into the details of the script and all that, let me know whether or not you have heard of Green Arrow: Escape from Supermax and your thoughts on it. I personally found out about this movie when I was scrolling through some of the upcoming DC projects this year and next year. I saw one that I knew nothing about called Green Arrow Duality, set for later this year, directed by a director I've never heard of and starring actors I've never heard of either. So I figured it was a fan film or something that they just got on to IMDb somehow. But that led me down a rabbit hole of Green Arrow scripts because I just knew one had to be out there, at least one. And I came across this Green Arrow Escape from Supermax movie and saw that it was going to be directed by none other than David S. Goyer, the writer of the Blade trilogy, the Dark Knight trilogy, Man of Steel, BVS, and even played a hand in bringing us the new DC Sandman series. Goyer's a really interesting dude. He has some really big home runs under his belt, and he also has a lot of misses too. But he clearly loves bringing superheroes to the big screen, so I'm always happy to see his name attached to projects. Even though Goyer is labeled as one of the writers, it looks like the majority of the writing was gonna be handled by Justin Marks, who you may have heard of him for writing the Top Gun Maverick script and also the Jungle Book live adaptation back in 2016. But back in 2008, he was pretty unknown. This would have been his first writing credit. But just a year later, in 2009, he gave us the masterpiece sequel, Street Fighter II: The Legend of Chun-Li.
That shit was ass.
This movie was set to be in development on June of 2008, which is just a month before The Dark Knight releases. He didn't want Arrow to be viewed as a Batman ripoff, so he basically based him around Jason Bourne and a MacGyver type character. Let's set the stage and get into the overall concept of the movie. They made the decision to not make this an origin story, and I like that. It drops you off in a world where vigilantes and superheroes already exist. There's already an initiative to get mass vigilantes off of the street, so there's a lot of tension that's been built over the years ever since Oliver Queen has returned. We do get a brief mention of his origin as a flashback, which is something that I personally prefer. It's a little bit different than the show. It was basically just a yacht party and he ended up falling off of the boat, which we later find out, of course, as a twist, it wasn't just a fall and someone actually pushed him. Also, in difference to the show, it doesn't seem like he's struggling with his duality. He does his Green Arrow duties and he's very present and involved as Oliver Queen just as much as he is the Green Arrow. So the movie pops off with them attending a ball or gala, and while all this is happening, we're also getting flashes of Green Arrow running from the police and inevitably killing a lot of those cops and one of the chief officers. Oliver gets word of these murders while he's at the ball and he ends up leaving and going to investigate. While he's going to investigate, he does not realize that this person that killed these cops is dressed up as Green Arrow. A bunch of hijinks ensue. He does a lot of MacGyver-like things. There's a lot of explosions, a big chase, and he eventually allows himself to be taken in by the police to try to plead his case because Oliver Queen has been framed. And I gotta say, the first 15 minutes of this movie sound super dope, and if you're a fan of the show Arrow, it might even seem a little familiar to you. Arrow season 7 took a lot of cues from this script and they basically kind of paid homage to it in a lot of different ways, from him being befriended in jail, the elaborate breakout scheme, to there being some shady underground things happening in the prison, and even some of the setup of how he was framed and goes to jail in the first place. But after the first 15 minutes of this film, which is a great hook, once we get into prison, things start to get a little bit wackier. The actual prison is pretty dope and it's a really intricate design. In an interview with MTV, Justin Marks stated how he was actually an architecture student before he started writing, and that definitely comes through on this design of the prison. He basically wanted this prison to be pretty much a character in the story, just like everyone else. In the script, it states that every day the cells move around and change, and basically to disorient them and to try to prevent people from trying to escape. And there's a control room where they can control every single cell. There's cells with people for ice powers where they can overheat the room. And most of the people in the Supermax are powered, so there's power dampeners on everyone so they can't use them. And the warden of this prison is none other than Amanda Waller. She even has microphones in all of the cells so she can always hear their conversations, which is a cool idea, but it's kind of pointless because they use some of the stupidest ways to get around that, like talking around pigeons and chewing with their mouth full as if that means that she can't make out their conversation. And in this prison, we have a lot of C-list villains. We have people like Count Vertigo, Floronic Man. They didn't use Captain Cold or Mr. Freeze. They used Icicle. There were references to other villains, like a sign on the wall that said Enigma was here, obviously referring to Edward Nygma, aka the Riddler. There was a cell that had a reference to the Joker, and there was a Lex Luthor reference as well. When Arrow first entered the Supermax prison, he very clearly has this mindset that if you've done a crime, then you definitely deserve to do the time. He has this really no-nonsense attitude, so it is really interesting to see him go in and have to work with these supervillains in order to break out of prison. The concept is dope, but I feel like this is an early draft because his turn from being that no-nonsense guy to then going on and befriending a lot of these villains was very flimsy at best. The main one that Oliver becomes friends with is the Pied Piper. And where I was talking about where the script gets a little silly, there's a very intricate, detailed, long paragraph of how the Pied Piper uses ants to communicate with Oliver Queen in his cell. They state in the script that he can hear through ants. And I'm gonna play you a clip from the Canceled Movie podcast of the speech that the Pied Piper gives Green Arrow in order to convert him into helping criminals escape from prison.
What do you want from me?
Your trust, your faith, and your willing partnership in our escape.
Sorry, but I'm no villain.
That doesn't matter. No man belongs in this place, good or bad. We're all victims within these walls, raped by the inhumanity. It's the souls they're violating. You built yourself from nothing. And when they found you 3 years later, you were a changed man. You understood the reason behind your simple existence, yes?
Yeah, I finally knew who I was.
Let me help you find yourself again. The Green Arrow is dead, but he can be reborn. He is the only man who can show the world that cages like this should never exist. None of us deserve Supermax.
Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Yeah, so that's the speech that changes Oliver Queen from being a no-nonsense vigilante who cares nothing about villains into literally becoming some of their, best friends and helping them escape prison. That one scene was all he needed to change his mind. At this point in the story, it basically becomes that prison break story that we were talking about. They build together a team, and the largest section of the film is pretty much them planning their breakout and then attempting the breakout that they planned. The main antagonist of the film is actually Merlin, or if you watch the Arrow show, Malcolm Merlin, but they just call him Merlin in this script. And he's basically offered a contract to kill Oliver Queen in the Supermax. He is in normal prison. They offer him this contract in order to shorten his sentence, so obviously he takes it. The only reason they offered him this contract because the judge was in on the setup, and if he would have sentenced Oliver Queen to death, the people would have been extremely upset by that because it's heavily implied that the people really love Green Arrow. After the team is assembled and the prison break shenanigans ensue, there are so many twists in here, man. Justin Marks was really trying to give old M. Night Shyamalan a run for his money. During this time is where we find out the Dark Archer Merlin was the one who actually killed the Colonel. Once they get to the actual breakout, a lot of people die pretty gruesomely. When they finally escape the actual Supermax prison, they go to find a huge room full of screens imitating that there's sunshine and forests and stuff like that. Then they escape that part of the Supermax to find out that they're in, of all places, Antarctica.
Surprise, motherfucker.
A big third act fight ensues where they're fighting all of the guards and officers at the Supermax prison. They somehow come out victorious of that fight. A lot of MacGyver-like activities from Arrow ensue. That scene ends with him passing out. They wake up being rescued by some scientists, and of course, another twist. Those scientists weren't actually scientists at all. They worked for the Supermax as well. Another fight ensues, which I have no idea why, if these people worked for Supermax and they found all these guys passed out, why they wouldn't just put them in handcuffs and take them back to Supermax. Instead, they put on this elaborate scheme to act like scientists only for it to go wrong. But we gotta have another twist, so of course someone crosses the team. I have no idea how they got out of the situation. There's a lot of jump cuts in the script, but they get back to the United States and they make it a big deal for Oliver to find out that his friend Hackett was the one who helped set all of this up in the first place, which wasn't much of a twist because they already let us know that at the beginning of the film. He escapes and eventually comes after Hackett, of course, gets captured, and then ends back up at the Supermax. But like I said, there is a lot of twists. Oliver and Hackett are in a room talking about what's going on. Hackett is basically telling him, look, you're never getting out of here. Only for Oliver Queen to walk in the door, and Hackett is of course confused because there's two Oliver Queens.
What?
And then the one who was captured was actually the shapeshifter. They catch Hackett in his lie and have everything they need to get Oliver off the hook. And that's definitely an over summarized version. There's so much wackiness in this script, but outside of the numerous twists and the clear influence from Jason Bourne, this definitely seems like a movie that I would want to see. It kind of feels like this is a sequel to a movie that we've never seen before, which Goyer is definitely known to do. I felt the same way after watching BVS for the first time. And I wish that there was more Green Arrow stuff happening in this film. I think since the show hadn't come out yet, it would have made more sense to see him in his vigilante mode a little bit more first. But what do you think? Should they revive this script? Would this be a movie that you would watch? Let me know what you think about the abandoned film Green Arrow Escape from Supermax down in the comments.